Now back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
And welcome back to The Law Show. Zach Spencer here on CL 650 talking about immigration law. Before the break, we touched on the new citizenship law that's in Parliament just now. And joining us, two experts, they're partners at MKS firm downtown, moving to the new address, which is where?
688 West Hastings.
At the end of June. Right?
Yeah. June 25th.
And we Rudy Kisher is who you just heard there, and Alex Stojkovic talking about the new law. Now, there's a change in the language requirement, and I think a lot of Canadians are kind of on board with having some proficiency in one of our two official languages.
Yeah, I think it's a good change. I mean, what you saw under the Conservative governments was a tightening up of this. When I started practice, I was shocked to see when I met with a CIC officer and asked them, I was looking at the Act, and it says in there you've got to test for English proficiency 15 years ago, and I said, so how do you test for that? And wondering how my clients are going to have to show that. It's like, well, if they arrive at the testing center and we direct them to their chair and they don't seem to have any problem sitting down, then we figure they can speak and listen to English good enough.
It's pretty basic.
That was horrible. I was horrified. So the Conservatives picked up where you actually had it now, either have graduated high school or from some schooling in the English language, or you had to go then do an English test. On the changes that they enacted, though, I think they went a little too far, and they expanded the ages of which you had to be tested. Before, under the Liberal government, you had to show your English proficiency from the age of 18 to 54, right? If you got older or you were too young, we didn't bother with the English testing on that. The Conservatives backtracked that, and then they expanded where you had to show your English proficiency. So anybody 14 now has to write an English test, and anybody below 65. So you've got people that are in their 60s, maybe have come over here on the grandparent.
So I guess they looked at it for your whole working life, which I guess you could start working at 15.
Well,
maybe,
yeah.
especially in a family business, and all the way up to 65. Well, I guess, which is the way they looked at it, which you think was too punitive.
I think it was a little bit punitive, especially. I mean, I think it was a waste of government time. I mean, why are we testing 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds to
They're
see if
sponges,
they speak?
Right?
I mean, my experience. I mean, I'm helping this refugee family. Our church is resettling this family, and I've seen these little 6-year-old kids that have come over from Syria, and within 6 months, they're speaking and helping the father out, right, where he's still struggling. So I don't think there was any, point in the government spending money on testing that. So I think
so we're back to what numbers now?
We're going to be going between the ages of 18 and 54 again, which is what what the old rules were, and I think is a reasonable. They're going to keep the testing requirement there, but just sort of make the ages.
But you had a great story the last time where we talked about somebody who was running a restaurant who is Asian, speaking only to people in his restaurant in the back end who are speaking the Chinese, and they don't have a lot of practice speaking English, right?
Yeah.
So for them, it's hard to learn.
Yeah, my partner Gordon was mentioning about that he has clients, unfortunately, that work in an ethnic food restaurant and find it extremely difficult, despite having lived here for years. They work in a certain language, and they will be kept out for their entire life of the ability to have a Canadian passport if they don't learn that language, right? Well, not their entire life, but under the new rules, he'll be able to at least pass that test at 54, right?
Well, wouldn't you think that a number of years in the country, even if your language isn't great, if you've lived here for 15 years, you come on in?
I mean, my experience, I'm not an expert on language acquisition, but from my experience, the older somebody comes, when they come in their 40s, it becomes very hard. And it depends on the community. If they're in a community environment that's very large and that's where they settle, then
it's even harder.
It's even harder because they can just interact in that language the entire time. Right?
Yeah, I have some in-laws. They're Italians who came in the 50s, and some of the aunts are still, we're talking, a long time ago, and their English is still very stilted, right?
Yeah, and I mean, another change that we saw was in terms of the money that we're not seeing that change, which under the Conservative government, the price of a citizenship application has gone up to $630.
And so are the Liberals changing that?
They're not changing that, and we're stuck with, it used to be, I think the price was $50 before we were paying for an application.
Okay, so give me a list, a family of 4. What's the cost?
Oh,
you're looking at $1,260 for the parents, and then another $400 for the children, $200 each.
So this is the same whether they're offshore or they're here, right?
Well,
you have to be here.
It's permanent residence. You got to be here.
Oh,
so they're living
yeah.
here. Yeah. So they're here already. And I mean, I think what I find sometimes people forget is, the average Canadian wage, the average wage in BC is the median is $21 an hour. So a family that's making $40,000 a year, where do they find this money, especially if they're new immigrants, to apply for
just
citizenship?
So your listeners are clear, this is the processing fee. This is not our fees. This is the processing fee. Add to that proof that you speak English, so maybe you have to write a language test.
And that's
on
your dime?
That's all on your dime.
Right.
So it's very easy for a family of four this to cost $1,700 or $1,800. A program that up until 2013 was not costing that same family of four more than $600.
Okay, give me what's the number you think for a family of four to come into the country once you add in your fees?
Well, I mean, it's not coming into the country. The question is for citizenship.
Sorry, become citizenship. I'm confused there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So to become citizens, what is a typical sort of amount?
Well, I mean, I think $100 or $50 amount to make an application. This is a public good that we want people to be able to participate. I don't know why we're putting a fine. We want them to be an honest application. I don't think people are going to waste their time applying if they don't think they meet the category. It's not like I don't think it was an issue of. To me, I'm not sure what the Conservatives were trying to make everything in terms of user pay, right? And I think when we're looking at citizenship, a basic right that after somebody who's lived here for years, I don't think their economic status should make the difference on whether they're able to apply and able to afford to apply.
Yeah, because somebody who is maybe at a much higher tax bracket is have no problem.
It doesn't even think about it. Whatever, $500, $2,000, I'll pay that for the application. For the person that's making $50 an hour.
The challenge that you have is if you let this go, you've created disincentives to to citizenship, and with disincentives, then you create a class of people that is a long-term permanent resident, and these are people that live in our society for long periods of time. Who if they get into trouble or their children get into trouble, can be deported, whereas if they were citizens, they couldn't be. Who don't vote, who don't participate fully in public life, and increases their social isolation. Part of the same issues we were talking about. Well, if I don't speak English, so I'm not going to apply for citizenship. Well, you're basically self-exiling long term, and that's a bad policy approach.
I mean, take a look at the
I just want to say we're up against the clock here, guys. I know we could spill over to our next show, but your final thoughts on the new federal law that's coming in?
Well, the real challenge is they kept the administrative process for revocation. That's one of the things the minister announced was that they're looking at ways of making that administrative process more fair, despite what's in the bill, because a class action lawsuit was launched in Toronto that has basically paralyzed revocation proceedings. And because of that lawsuit, they are looking at ways of trying to make a system that's more fair. The bar takes the view that from the previous federal court system was a very fair system. It is being turned into now essentially a ministerial process with no hearings, very little disclosure of information, and we think as a stakeholder, as a bar, and in the interest of justice, that this should be a hearing of some kind available.
Got to have your day in court, right?
That's right.
I mean, part of the problem is you ended up previously you were seeing about 50 revocations a year, right? It was the normal. When they found this massive fraud in Ontario,
and sometimes as little as 20.
And then they had one year where they were trying to revoke 3,000. So the number, they weren't able to use the old system.
We are going to be back for a future show with our guests here on The Law Show, Rudy Kisher and Alex Stojkovic. Thank you very much for coming in from MKS Law in downtown Vancouver. This is The Law Show. We're talking immigration law, and we'll have our guests back soon. I'm Zach Spencer. Thanks for listening to CL 650.